Well, there are currently few politicians in the country who wouldn't agree that housing is now a crisis in Australia and that the problem is getting worse. The issue is so urgent that the Queensland government held a roundtable conference about it on Friday, and one of its first resolutions was to place 200 homeless people in rooms at a university college. But that's just the start. Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk said after the meeting, quote, "We are now asking Queenslanders out there, people, businesses, church groups, if you have any properties or land that can help us, we will work with you." She went on, already one of the participants in today's meeting identified 90 blocks of land across Queensland with the view of putting some accommodation on those blocks of land, unquote. So that's where we're at. Finding vacant blocks of land so the government can stick up mobile homes for the homeless. This is yet another band-aid solution to a problem of the government's own making. And the Queensland government isn't alone. All the state housing ministers met their new federal counterpart in July to discuss the crisis and ways to implement the federal Anthony Albanese government's election promises. Before this group of ministers met, the Urban Development Institution of Australia, or UDIA, released a statement offering them some advice, which was to remove the red and green tape that, quote, prevents a property supply-side response to housing demand, unquote. The UDIA suggested streamlining planning and approval of new developments to reduce delays. Its national president said, quote, "Both state and federal governments need to partner to find meaningful solutions to the challenges of housing costs, coupled with smart lending practices and incentives that blend ownership with supply. In this way, we can meet the demands for access to housing across the spectrum and begin to address the housing supply and affordability crisis," unquote. Well, the summit ignored the UDIA's plea. Speeding up the approval process for new developments didn't even get a mention in their resolutions. Instead, the state and federal ministers resolved to throw $10 billion of your money at 30,000 so-called affordable homes. By the way, you hear that term affordable housing a lot these days. It sounds nice, but it's actually the opposite. It's a euphemism for tiny, identical, prison-like cells in large blocks that nobody would choose to live in if they could. Here's a typical example. This is one floor of an approved development in Randwick, in inner Sydney. It's essentially a 67-room boarding house. The average dwelling, including kitchen, bedroom and bathroom, is a depressing 17 square metres. That's smaller than the average hotel room. This is what current policies are encouraging because governments can promote them as affordable. Meanwhile, in Brisbane, politicians and other officials hold their own follow-up to the federal Gabfest and celebrate the fact that they've found 200 beds for the homeless at a university college. It's pathetic.